Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining myself and Dr. Bode Akintan. I'll try and keep it official, Dr. Akintan, but strange. So now
Bode,
and again, you get to say
you
Bode.
Bode.
So the reason why we decided to do this talk, really particularly for me, was that a couple of weeks ago, there was a video going around showing a small child, or some small children really, saying that if you're born in the 2020s, all you'll be doing is everything that's a sanitizer to you, and you're just touching it and just trying to rub your hands together. And it was funny. It was on the family platform, on our WhatsApp family platform. It was very funny, and we all laughed about it. And lo and behold, my two-year-old nephew comes round and starts doing it, and I'm like, what? And he was like, rub, 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 rub. And I have a sanitizer just by the entrance, and he just kept on going towards the door and just saying, oh, rub, 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 rub. And I'm thinking, no, this is really for real. And he lives in the UK, but he's holidaying right now with us in Nigeria. And for him, outside is just the big deal. If you want to get him off his mom, just say, we're going outside. He wants to just go outside. He wants to run around. He just wants to play. And I'm thinking, this poor child doesn't even know what it is to play outside, because it's cooked up. There's a lot. It's been now that he's able to reason and he can talk. All he's done is watch Coco Mellow or Bling, but nothing about life outside, gardening, running around, playing football. So, but in Nigeria, where he has the opportunity of a big compound and he can run around, and I was just watching this child and I'm thinking, oh no, this child really, the children are really going through a lot. And I think we had something on our uni platform where we spoke about coping during this pandemic, and something about children came up. And this is me the next day or 2 days after saying, but we have to do something, remember? And
yes,
I
do.
And this is how we came to this. So I'm just going to introduce Dr. Bode Akintan, who I've known since well over 30 years. Wow.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
You met me when I was 5. Okay, you met me when I was 5, so that makes sense. About 30 years.
Yeah, right. Then that makes me 2. So, but okay, we both remember. I think you went to ISL. I think I met you whilst you were in ISL.
Yes, I was in ISL. Yeah.
That was where I met you, but I don't know. But we ended up in the same university anyway. But it was cool. All right. Until I'm sure you don't want me to say this.
I'm scared to hear it.
I'm sure you know what I'm about to say.
I don't know.
Until Nene came along.
Oh, her, yeah.
And Bode was a different Bode. So Bode was a puppy in love. Always after Nene. And it's a good story because Nene and him are still together. They are married. They have 2 children who are in university. Yeah. And I still see that the love is still there, because now and again, Nene, anytime Bode has a chance to drop in Nene's name, you know Nene's coming next. So, but that is a good story. That's a lovely story. Sweetheart, University Sweetheart, and they're here today. Bode is a medical doctor, as we all know. He's a child and adolescent psychiatrist. He believes he can still break dance. But hey, one of the, oh yeah, right. You are not one of those dancers in those days anyway. Did you even?
No.
I don't even think you came to parties with us. I think we were the bad ones. Yesterday and I. I'm not sure you came to parties with us. I think you're just the bookworm?
Yes, I was. I wasn't playing at all. I was studying hard all the time.
Until the neck came, right?
Yes.
So, and body has kept body. Let me sort of fun things about body that we know about. Okay, I know he's a football fanatic, a Barcelona fan, football club fan. He's an ethical. I mean, where do you see a medical doctor that has 2 MBAs? Really, 2 MBAs, but what are you doing with them? And then one from an Ivy League school, Cornell. Really?
Yeah, I went to Cornell. Yeah.
Really, buddy? That's unfair. But
I was bored.
So you were what?
I was bored.
You were bored. Hi, Tammy. Tammy saying hello to our daddy.
Hello, darling.
Oh, so Buddy, and then Buddy has worked in Lagos, London, New York, Maryland, and now Toronto. Yeah. We're in for a good ride today, Buddy. Anyway, Buddy, that's you in a nutshell, I believe. So we just get into it, and today we're just going to start the session on a more serious note, and children, and how do we cope with our children, you know. I'm just going to ask you a first question, and I hope this will just roll on to different questions, and if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, and we'll try and address it as much as we can. I want us to keep within the 45 minutes we said. That's integrity. So we'll start. So, Buddy, I'd say, firstly, Buddy, the aim of this program is to help parents and caretakers to pinpoint signs that children are stressed, to pinpoint things that we can do. Hopefully, this session will help parents, you know, navigate and know when the tell signs are and how to do with the best to do with a child. And we know each child is bio-individual to who they may be. You know, I read just yesterday or 2 days ago about a 12-year-old boy who, happy-go-lucky child, you know, I think it was going to be 13 pretty soon, but couldn't face the fact that he's not going to have a party, and you know, blah de blah de blah. Anyways, it was with the family. They're all together. It was 30 minutes after. I mean, it was away from them for 30 minutes. I think his dad said they were either building something, and he excused himself, and I think they all thought he had gone to the bathroom or something. But 30 minutes later, his sister found him dead and hung himself. His father did everything he could, but it was too late. Paramedics, everything came, was somewhere in the States. And, you know, so I mean, say 13-year-old boy, 12-year-old boy didn't know how to handle the stress of not going to school and not having a party. I mean, for us, extreme Nigerians, we just think, excuse me if you're not Yoruba, they'll say, oh my budget. But it's not that. Each child is individual. It's an individual that have individual problems. How do we help this child? How do we help our children? How do we notice the signs? As a parent, the most unheard of thing is to bring your child down where he's on himself and try to revive him, and knowing yourself that it's already too late. How do you even go past that? So, and how do we tell our children about this deadly virus without inciting fear within them? So, Dr. Body, up to you.
So first of all, thank you for inviting me. And yes, we've known each other since I was 5. That's over 30 years ago. And I recognize that the vast majority of the people in the audience today would be Nigerians, my people. So I can speak freely and I can speak from experience. And I hope that people find that helpful. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist. I work in emergency psychiatry and acute care. So I get to see people arguably at their worst, at their lowest. And so some of that has been helpful in terms of giving me some level of expertise. And my experience generally has allowed me to at least have a broader perspective influenced by my own upbringing. So I'm going to try to infuse my professional learning with my lived experience and my familiarity with the culture in Nigeria. How do we inform kids without inciting fear? I think that's the question.
Yeah.
So it depends on the age of the child. It depends on the age of the child. I think that the primary principles of the communication have to be honesty and being responsible brokers of information. What we don't want to do is to believe that we can scare the child straight, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and we want to try to make sure that we're getting the information for the children probably 12 and lower. We might be as parents, we might be the primary sources of information for them. And so we want to make sure that we're getting the information, we're reading it, we're understanding it. And perhaps as best as we can, we're just sharing the information as we're seeing it in a watered down, easy to understand version. If you're not an expert, many of the reliable sites, WHO, the CDC, they actually have language watered down in terms of just understanding what's happening with the virus. And so I would direct many parents to go to those websites and see whether they can have language that actually speaks directly to what we know, not what we think, not what we fear. Because what many people are doing is conveying their own fears and communicating their fears to their child, and assuming that their child will take that as truth. I worry about the risk of the child being scared straight, because a lot of parents feel like if they just tell you what the worst thing that could happen is, that might make you buckle up. Don't make stuff up. I remember I grew up in a world of parents just saying whatever felt right at the moment because they felt it would have the right impact. But I would caution parents to hold off on just, if you don't know it, you can actually tell your child, I don't know this. Mm-hmm. Let's go figure it out together. Let's go find out together. And let's go to the reliable source of information and look at it together. Because what you don't want to do is make stuff up, and you don't want to create a sense of fear in the child so that you perhaps compromise the child's curiosity.
Okay, cool. And then someone just asked about the mental health of a child. I guess that would help with. That's why they're bio-individuals, really.
Yeah. So in terms of managing the mental health of a child when you're talking to this child, is that I'm assuming that's the question. So
Abby, can you just rephrase your question again? Because I'm not sure. I mean, I know that you mentioned something about the mental health of a child. Can you just rephrase that question again? But in the meantime, we'll just move on to another question again. Is that we know this has been a stressful time for people, especially children as well, who have not been able to express themselves like we adults are been able to. What are the things that we're to look out for? How do we know a child is stressed? And how do we deal with that stress? So there are two questions here. What are things to look out for? We notice that stress, and how do we deal with the stress?
So a couple of things. Parents know their child. When I'm at work, I would often say to parents, I'm the expert, but you are the expert of this child. That means you've known the child from birth. And so you will know your child's temperament. And so a deviation from their normal pattern of behavior is what you're looking for. There are certain things that happen just as part of normal development. Parents will joke about them at parties. They will talk about them, my child is now doing this. That's fine. I think it's a deviation from their normal patterns that you're looking for. Those are the things that will convey the impression that they're going through stress. The other thing I would have to say here is children can tell you if you ask. And we, again, recognizing that I'm speaking to a familiar audience here, there is this hesitation to engage in some difficult conversations with children. And I would encourage parents to have those conversations with their children and just ask them, how are you coping with this? Mm-hmm. This is hard. And perhaps in addition to that, not just asking them, but telling them that you're also having a struggle. Because I don't know that parents are doing enough of that, creating a space for their child to be able to convey their own worries about their stress. So I would say that the recognition of your child's temperament, the recognition of what your child's behaviors have been, and if there's a deviation from that, is what you're looking for in terms of what may constitute their expression of being under stress.
So what I'm going to take out from what you just said is that both the parents and the child should walk the walk.
Yes, but let me take it a little further than that. Stress isn't all bad. Stress isn't all
I agree
bad.
with that.
You have to so if you think about stress as like there's positive stress, like you're going on a blind date, you're anxious about the person you're going to meet, you have an exam, maybe a professional exam, you have a professional exam coming up, you're stressed about it. You have a promotion that you've applied for, you're stressed about it. That's positive stress. Then there's tolerable stress. Tolerable stress is the loss of a loved one, even the loss of a child, the loss of a parent, a major catastrophe. However, the tolerable stress is stress that you're experiencing in the context of a support system. So you can tolerate the stress, you're supported. Now, there are difficult things. No one is questioning that the loss of a loved one, the loss of a parent, a sibling, even heaven forbid a child, can be extraordinary. But when you have a support system, either immediate family or a religious network or a community of people who support you, you can tolerate the stress. Then there's toxic stress. Now, toxic stress it could even be the same events that happened that you would have been able to tolerate if you had a system around you. But when you don't have a system around you, then and the stress is a chronic stress. So it's a chronic, painful, perhaps debilitating stress. That is what causes a lot of the difficulty. And toxic stress can best be managed when you have a support system around you. When you don't have a support system around you, that is when you start to break down. So there are different kinds of stress, and I think what we've experienced as a global family here has been a form of toxic stress, with people being at varying levels of the ability to manage that stress, depending on the network that they have. So for some people, this is tolerable stress, but even though they have a network of people around them, it's gone on for a very long time. So everybody, or at least most people's resilience has been strained.
Interesting. So, but as a parent,
Yeah,
who tries, especially in our culture, Nigeria, I think that one way of showing love, we try and shield the child from every single thing shieldable. What we should talk about, and even when we are stressed, we don't, and the child can see that we are stressed. The child can see we're stressed, but then we are still trying to keep that bold face that no, everything is okay. It's just a pandemic. It's going to go pretty soon. But the child feeds off ourselves, our own stress as well. How do we as parents manage that?
Yeah. So a young child's sense of how he or she should respond to the world is modeled for them by their parent. And so the parent's ability to show a child, here is how you engage the world, is so critical. And the child is not going to be a child forever. What they will have are the memories of their childhood. And so you want to start to create an opportunity to model for them that, it's okay to be sad sometimes. It's okay to be disappointed. When things happen that are disappointing, it's actually okay to have those feelings. And culturally, and I think with the best of intentions, we have tried to shield our children from negative experiences and negative emotions, almost not giving them permission to have those emotions. And because we're just flooded with a variety of emotions, we need an avenue to express all of them. my mom is almost 70, and I think I've seen her cry and be upset more now than I did as a child. And I know that she must have been sad and when I was young. I know that she must have gone through periods of disappointment, but they never expressed it to us. We never saw them in those moments outside of perhaps their response to something. But simply saying that makes me sad isn't something that I recall that any of our parents, at least my parents, didn't say to me, that thing that happened made me sad. However, what I do recall is, and I, at the risk of a bit of self-disclosure, my mom would read a newspaper, and seeing another person who had died, whom she didn't know, would make her cry. And I remember that, and I thought, wow, she's so sensitive. But in retrospect, it was a healthy expression of compassion that she could have worry about somebody else. So although I didn't see a lot of it, the little bits I saw normalized her for me. And I think what we can do with our children now is to let them feel comfortable experiencing all of the emotions and even fear. There are some things that are legitimately fearful, and you want to be able to tell your child that's actually a really scary thing, and talk to them about it. Because not talking to them about it doesn't mean they don't know about it. It just means you haven't given them permission to talk about it.
So we need to create an environment where we both can express ourselves.
Correct.
So in particularly now, for us in Nigeria, and there's so many things going apart from the pandemic. There's a scare of the next NSAS that might happen. We don't know. How do you manage your children? What do they need most at this point in time? What do you think? What's their anchor for our children, particularly now?
The same thing that they've always needed.
Sorry?
The same thing they've always needed. The presence of an engaging, supportive, emotionally healthy parent. That goes back to the tolerable stress. So what is happening right now isn't necessarily, it's unique because we've never gone through a pandemic before, but what they need most now is what they have always needed, what children always need. They need a parent who is engaged, they need a parent who's available to them, they need a parent who's leaning in, and they need that parent to be emotionally healthy. If the parent is emotionally healthy, they can be the best parent for that child. When they are not acknowledging their own emotional wellness, they can't be an effective parent. And so they start to see things that perhaps aren't there. They start to respond to things that they may not need to respond to. And then it becomes this downward spiral. So what kids need most right now are healthy parents who are available to them and engaged with them.
Okay. So how do you respond to a child that has COVID?
Well, so that's there are many layers to that. They have the virus, they tested positive, they're asymptomatic. Really nothing. You just talk to them about it. You say, oh, we had a test, you're positive, it means we don't have to go out. It means we have to make sure that you're eating and drinking water and physically active as you typically would. What I worry about is this, first of all, because the science doesn't bear it out. Having a positive COVID test is not a death sentence. I hear people, binding and saying this and that. And I'm like, listen, by far, the majority of people who have this virus are going to survive, most of them without symptoms. So when you convey this sense that we can never have it, we can never have it, we can never have it, and then you have it, the child is petrified.
Mm-hmm.
So you haven't really helped that child who perhaps to be asymptomatic, because now you've created this foundation of fear when perhaps the fear at that level was not justified. So in terms of having those conversations, your child tests positive, okay. That the only thing that actually changes really for an asymptomatic or a minimally symptomatic child with COVID is that they get to stay home, and that everybody in that bubble gets tested. You make sure you're washing your hands, make sure that you're eating healthy, make sure that you're sleeping okay. That really is it. So there really doesn't have to be this elaborate conversation, because really, if you have malaria, I don't know that anybody's having an elaborate conversation with their child who gets sick with malaria. It is really just about making sure that they're following the guidelines and that you're eating healthy and that you're having a conversation with them that, listen, we're going to get through this together. Most people get well. You're probably going to get well.
I mean, you touched on something which you know, for me, it's a big deal as well, eating well. Our eating habit here in Nigeria is a bit, I don't want to say anything, but you know what, I'm sure everybody understands.
I don't know what you're saying, because I crave Nigerian food, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, you crave Nigerian food, but I mean, in terms of when you say eat healthy, in terms of eating your fruits and your veg, most children, when you see them or you feed, for example, you give a child fried rice, they start removing every single thing. And that's because they haven't been brought up to eat vegetables. My niece and my nephews will say, I don't eat this, Auntie Tutan. I don't do that, and I don't do that. But then I put it in a smoothie, they take it. And they don't tell me, I don't do this, I don't do that. And they say, oh, are we not having smoothie today, when they're staying with me? And I'm thinking, oh, really? But you don't eat this. And that thing's inside the smoothie. So how do we get our children to eat healthy and stay healthy and actually give them a healthy lifestyle, really?
So we are venturing outside of my comfort zone and coming into your comfort zone. So that's my disclaimer right there. I think that a healthy diet is one element of a healthy lifestyle. Eating healthy, sleeping well, you know, keeping good cheer, going out for exercise. It's a variety of things, and I wouldn't necessarily
you don't eat
suggest
vegetables, Dr. Akintan.
I don't know. People are spreading rumors around here. So, but I think, in all seriousness, though, I do feel that a healthy diet is one part of a healthy spectrum of lifestyle activities that people have to engage in. And what you don't want to do is to die on the hill of diet. I think it's important that people eat healthy, but there are many other things that they also have to do that we probably also have to pay as much attention to, so that we don't feel like, well, once you've eaten, everything else is going to be okay. Because if you're eating and you're sleeping 2 to 3 hours a night because you're on your social media, you're not healthy. It doesn't matter how many vegetables you eat. So I think it really is, if you're not getting any kind of physical activity, it doesn't matter how many vegetables you eat. It does matter that you have a reasonable contribution in all the domains of your life of making the right decisions.
Okay, so
and that includes eating healthy.
Okay, now that we're talking about staying healthy, living a healthy lifestyle, what do you think? Because I find, especially now during this pandemic, you want to give your child everything so they are comfortable, you know. And how do you limit a child with their devices? Isn't that's part of living healthy as well? That's their mental health as well, with their on their devices forever.
Yes, and this is a very there are many elements to this. So there are guidelines from the leading pediatric organizations in the United States, and I suspect in many other guidelines around screen time. All of those guidelines really went out with 2020, and they did because the no screen time, I think, before 18 months, and then now up until 5 years. There were some, I can't remember all of the guidelines, but there were some really important guidelines that were offered for screen time. When a kid is online for school, that's screen time. So I don't think that parents want to die on the hill of don't be on your device or don't do this or don't do that. There are so many restrictions that I feel it's really, really hard for us to get into a conflict with our child over screen time. When you and I are on the screen right now, I happen to be fortunate. My work requires that I'm in an emergency room and I'm in an inpatient unit, so I have to be there in person. Many of my colleagues practice entirely from home on the screen. If they're
Yeah, telling her.
on the screen for 8 hours of the day, they can't argue that their child not be on the screen, especially when their child is doing screen time for school. So it's not as clear cut as it was perhaps in 2019, where you could argue that there was a legitimate concern about excessive time on the devices. Right now, for many, it is their only social outlet. For many, it is not. It is the only way they get education. So I'm not sure that the argument for limiting devices. I think you can have a conversation with your child and say, "Hey, listen. Perhaps when we're having dinner, let's make it device free. Perhaps when we are going for a half an hour walk, let's make it device free." But in terms of legislating the amount of time they spend on the device, I don't know that you have a compelling argument when perhaps you'll spend 5 hours in front of the device as well.
True. I mean, that's so true as well. But then, I mean, I had a family stay over with me over Christmas, and the mother won't even let them touch a device at all. She said she doesn't even want to see anything. She doesn't even want to see iPad. She said because they've had screen time throughout school. Everything has been on screen. The children don't even know what normal is without a screen. So I guess as we said earlier, each child is individual to their own self. So you treat your child as it is.
I would add that.
Go on.
If you now do that, when you're, and I don't know this person, and I'm not making a judgment on them, so I want to be careful to not suggest that. But if you have to now take what I would perhaps use the term draconian measure and say you can have no devices, it perhaps suggests that you didn't have any limits on the devices in the first place. Because that doesn't sound to me like a response of, well, we have rules around the devices in the first place. So I just feel like the going from you can always have your device to you can no longer have your device. Kids are creative. I know that there were many rules that were placed on me as a kid that I went around. And what you don't want to do is to look for the kids, is to create opportunities for the kids to walk around right now, because there's so many unknowns, so many things we don't have control over that I think around.
Okay. I lost you for a few minutes. Are you still there, Dr. Akintan?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I lost the last bit you said. I don't know if everybody heard you.
I don't even know if I heard myself. What was I talking about?
So, you were talking about screen time, and I was telling you about the family that the mother just took all their devices away over Christmas and said no screen time, and I was like, oops, and she was like, all they've done throughout the time has been on the screen, and now they just need to have a normal life with no screens.
Yeah. And I just responded by saying, I don't know this person, and I don't want to be disrespectful to them, and I'm sure that they love their child and they want the best for their child. And I think that often when you take extreme measures like that, it's reflective of perhaps not having had the conversations early on and setting the parameters for screen use. And so that exists. However, in the times that we're in, those rules aren't as likely to hold. So you want to create flexibility and actually transition from here is how much screen time you can have to can we have some off screen time, knowing that the rest of it is really we're just trying to get by. All of us are just trying to get by. Duntan, I am not functioning at 100%. Nobody is functioning at 100%. So because we are not functioning at 100%, we have to be kind to ourselves and allow ourselves some vulnerabilities. And I think dying on the heel of screen time is not a good death. It's just not the fight you want to have.
Okay, so I think we kind of dealt with that issue of screen time. How do you deal with teenagers who are rebelling during this time?
Teenagers are volatile. Teenagers are, as part of their normal development, going to separate and the term we use is individuate. They want to see who they are and figure out where they fit in the world. And some of that is modeled by their peers. Some of that is modeled by things that they've learned. Some of that is modeled by their parents. I don't know that, I think what might be happening in terms of kids rebelling more now may be a reflection of they're just spending way more time than they typically would with their parents. They're not at school. They're not out playing soccer or doing whatever else they typically would have been doing. And so they are, the extraordinary amount of time they're spending with their parents is putting a strain on that relationship.
Okay.
And so I don't know that I would categorize teenagers now as being perhaps more rebellious. I believe that the parents are just seeing more of it.
So as a parent, how do you deal with that? And how do you cope so that you don't turn away your child from you?
Good question. So earlier I talked about the importance of having a healthy parent, because an emotionally healthy parent is an emotionally available parent to that child. And if you are not kind to yourself to recognize that perhaps there are times when you are more vulnerable, or recognize that you are not functioning at your best, the demands you place on yourself and the expectations you have for that child are going to be unrealistic. And you are going to create conflict in circumstances where perhaps conflict could have been avoided. And really, it's about just trying to moderate yourself, because for what I think tends to be the misunderstanding is that when we, for instance, when we talk about creating a behavior plan, the behavior plan, a parent will say, I'm going to create a behavior plan for my child. Well, in reality, the behavior plan is your response to the child's behavior. It is not an expectation of the child's behavior. It is an expectation of you in response to the child's behavior. And so if you are not emotionally well and healthy enough to support that child and be available to that child and be effective with that child, you are not going to do a good job. So I don't know that it's any, I don't know that there is going to be a cookie cutter way of prescribing what a parent should be doing. I think it's just about making sure that you're well suited to engage your child. Because absent the pandemic, I wouldn't be informing people about how to raise their children. So the only variable that has changed is the pandemic. And what I can say to that is that the parents need to be much more available so that they can actually listen to their child. And if the child is pushing back, it may be a reflection of just their response, because developmentally that's what they're supposed to do. Or it may be a function of perhaps the period of a depression, anxiety. You know your child. If the deviation from normal is so extreme, then you can seek professional help. You can ask for somebody. I'm getting a lot of feedback in the sound. Am I breaking up? I'm
clear. Can everybody hear Dr.?
I'm hearing some static in the background.
Oh, it's clear here.
Oh, okay.
It's very clear here.
So my
is it clear for everybody?
Really, so my focus will be just making sure that the parents are available and are able to respond to their child, because the child is going to go through the ups and downs of their teenage life. They're going to go through the ups and downs of their early teen life. All of that is true. What is important is that the parent is available to respond in a healthy way. And for parents, for homes where it's a two-parent household, I think they can really take this time to say, hey, listen, I'm not doing well today. Why don't you do this bit? And you know, kind of bounce it off one another. They have the freedom and the ability to do that. In some single-parent homes, that's much harder. And I think in those circumstances, it's really important that the parent recognizes that, you know, I'm not at my best today. Maybe this is not the time that I want to engage Kola, because I know that I'm a bit friable right now. And if I go and try to address him, it's going to be a blowout. So it's probably not a good time. and just being sensitive to that.
Okay, so I mean, remember the child I saw, I told you I read about. Obviously, we don't know the full picture.
Yeah.
And it seemed to see they were having a family good time. The boy was laughing, excused himself. 30 minutes later, he was dead. What did they miss?
Okay, so there's some sad statistics around this. Half of completed suicides are completed by people who have not even come to the attention of the mental health system. And this is in North America, where we actually have those resources to help people. Now, the resources aren't perfect. The resources aren't equally available to everyone, but they exist. And still half of the people who complete suicide have not come into the attention of people who can help them. So that means that they're either suffering in silence, or the act itself was impulsive and reactive,
Mm-hmm.
or they had no access. It could be any one of those things. Now, recognizing that the community that I'm speaking to is a largely Nigerian community, perhaps largely based in Nigeria, there are a number of added challenges there. That the child may not feel comfortable talking to the parent about their struggles. Makes sense. We see a lot of that. Children just feel like, maybe my parents won't get it, or I can't say that, or if I say that, they'll send me to the doctor, or they'll send me to the pastor, or they'll do this, or they'll do that. In many instances, it may not be obvious. And so if half of the time we don't know, that half, we don't know what to do about it. We don't know if it's a function of the impulsive act. We don't know if it's a function of no access. We don't know if it's a function of not having the avenues to ask the question. But when we do know, though, or when the signs are there, I think we have a responsibility to pay attention to it and to engage. I don't think that parents are asking their children when their children are sad if their children are having thoughts of suicide. There's absolutely nothing wrong with asking a child if they're having thoughts of death. First of all, it's not going to make them more likely to kill themselves. There's no evidence of that. And secondly, if they tell you that, it actually gives you enough material to figure out how you can help them. So
True.
There's a lot of fear about just asking, and you can ask. There are many ways to ask. There's nothing wrong with saying to your child, I'm going to use caller, and I apologize to all the callers in the room. Caller, it is not unusual for people when they're sad to have thoughts about death. Is that something that you think about? There's nothing wrong with asking that question. Because if they're not thinking about it, they're not going to start thinking about it because you said that. And if they are thinking about it, they're more likely to say, yeah. That they think about it doesn't mean that they're trying to do something about it. There is this concept of passive suicidal thinking where you can have those thoughts. And having the thoughts doesn't mean that you have a plan. It doesn't mean that it's imminent. It is a function of the range of emotions and the range of thoughts that you're having in that moment. So I think that parents should be able to lean in and ask those questions so that they could potentially save their child's life. Now, I do not know if that was the case here, but many parents would say, oh, my child was doing very well. But if you ask the questions, and if you ask the questions properly, you find out that there were perhaps some telltale signs that you didn't see as telltale signs. So I will say, self-injury. There are people who engage in self-injury for a variety of reasons. They cut themselves, they pull their hair, they punch themselves, they do a variety of things. That you engage in self-injurious behavior does not mean you're suicidal. It often is a maladaptive, yes, but it's a way for many people to cope. And so these are questions that I think parents can ask about. Just talk to their children and ask how they're doing and how they're coping, and if they're having thoughts about death. And if they are, to figure out if they want to get help and then encourage them to get the help.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, we've spoken about self-harm and suicide and all this as well. During this pandemic, what is the most alarming thing in your line of work that you've seen?
Most alarming. That's again. I said earlier. I see people at their worst. So I don't know that there's a gradation for most, but I will say that the extent of and the severity of substance-related issues has been a surprise, because I've seen more children with substance-induced psychosis, and by that I mean cannabis, especially cannabis-induced psychosis. A psychotic illness is a break from reality where you're hearing voices, seeing things, acting in a disordered manner, and we've seen a rise in that. And we have some suspicions about what is going on. We haven't studied it, but we are just accumulating the data now to try to see whether there is a direct correlation between the restrictions placed by the pandemic and a rise in the frequency and quantity of not just cannabis use, but other drugs of abuse, and its relation to psychosis. So that has been surprising. That has been surprising. But the rise in we haven't necessarily seen a rise in suicide rates. In some provinces in Canada, we haven't, and we haven't seen in fact, in some provinces we've seen a decline in suicide rates. But again, the data, we're living the data now, so I don't want to make too many interpretations while the research is ongoing. But I will say that although from a volumes perspective, in terms of just the total number of people I'm seeing, I am seeing a lot of people, but usually this time of the year, we see a lot of people. So that in and of itself doesn't tell me very much. But what I will say though, is that as a proportion of the total number of people who come to the emergency room, we have a greater proportion. So generally people are not coming to the hospital, but for people who are coming to the hospital, many of them have mental health difficulties.
Okay, so somebody said here, somebody asked the question, which was one of the questions I was going to ask, that in Nigeria, particularly, what are the resources that you can point towards? I know you haven't been in Nigeria for a bit, but I believe you still have colleagues in Nigeria.
Yeah, I do.
Where can we point parents to, if there's any at all?
The premise of the question is encouraging. I'm happy that one, the question is being asked, and two, it suggests to me that there are parents in Nigeria who would actually access these resources. I was in Nigeria several years ago and I did a talk, and during that talk I actually had a psychiatrist and another behavior therapist in the room, and they practice in Nigeria. So these services exist in Nigeria. I didn't realize this. I would have brought some information to share, but I do have colleagues in Nigeria. Perhaps what I would do is I would share that information with you, and you can share with your followers.
On the platform. So
yes, but there are child psychiatrists in Nigeria. There are behavior therapists in Nigeria. There are psychiatrists practicing and supporting children. Now, it's not as robust a system as we have in North America, but it's better than nothing. And I think one of the gains of the pandemic has been the ability to provide distance care, virtual care. And I suspect that a number of people will be leveraging virtual care to provide services to people in Nigeria. And I'm looking forward to that. And to the extent that I can participate in that, I'll give my bit, but I do feel that there are resources in Nigeria for people who need help.
Okay. Another person asked, how do we get younger kids to process their feelings? When you say younger kids, what age are you thinking about? I'm asking the person who asked the question.
Well, I mean, I think I can probably answer the question broadly.
Okay.
You can have the conversation. Again, I'm referencing my childhood, right? And knowing that my parents never asked me about my feelings, period. It just didn't. It wasn't culturally endorsed. It was just not how we communicated with our parents. We are doing it differently. And I know that our parents loved us. I know that they meant the world for us. They wanted us to be fine. They just didn't know how to do it. It isn't about saying the right thing. It is about being available to listen. And I think that for any child, when you can create a culture of listening, you are far better off, because it's not about just how much time you're spending in the presence of that child, not the quantity of time, it's the quality of time. So if you're present, if you're connected, if you're engaged, the child will share with you if they know that you have created a safe space for them to have that conversation.
And that's very true. And that's one thing I say as well, that my growing up as well, we didn't have that environment. And I guess that's the way of them showing love. Obviously, we have moved. We're now more modern. And we're more aware than our parents are. And I think we're showing more love. I mean, we've spent almost an hour here. We did say 45 minutes, and we could go on forever. And I'm just going to recap what Bode said that I think we need to take away with us before we end the session. So isn't it about saying the right thing? It's about being it's being available to listen. So it's same thing, creating that environment. So what some of the key things that Bode said was that if you're unable to communicate with your child in a simple way about this COVID-19 or the pandemic or whatever it may be, WHO has a simpler version and CDC. So if you can log on, and I think I'm not sure if the Nigerian NDCC has that information in a more simpler way as well. But I have seen some adverts, some local adverts as well, from Kwara State, and I think I saw one from Lagos State, explaining COVID to the child as well, which I thought was very, very nice. Yeah. Also, one of the things it said is that as parents, we need to engage, we need to be supportive, we need to spend quality time with our children, listen to their children, give them an enabling environment so they have a safe space to talk. And don't be like that Nigerian parent that says, what did you just say? And give you one crime. Times have changed, We are no longer in those days where they'll tell you, go and choose this guy. Children are asking more questions. Children are more inquisitive. So I'd say, please, as parents, let's make ourselves intentionally available to these children. Let's intentionally bite our tongues. Don't second guess them. Let them be who they are. Let them express themselves in a safe place. And I think with that as well, we can reduce the amount of mental health issues these children would have. And however, still, another thing again is we should ask leading questions. Ask the questions and let them talk. They'll take you to where they want you to go to at that point in time. Or not wherever they've stopped, and then start again the next time you have that conversation.
Can I just highlight, sorry, I want to highlight that. I would suggest, especially for that, to say, how are you doing? Instead of asking, are you okay? Mm-hmm. Because are you okay is a leading question that begs a very brief, get out of my room, or no. How are you doing is an open-ended question that begs a conversation. Are you okay isn't. So I think we need to be mindful of the language, even as we're asking these questions and what it is that we're trying to get. If I just want the person to say yes, I'm going to ask, are you okay? If I want to have a question, if I want to have a conversation, I'm going to say, how are you doing? What's going on? It's an open-ended question that begs for a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's so true. Dr. Bode Akintan, thank you very much.
A pleasure.
And
thank you for inviting me.
I hope everyone's taking some points away from this talk. This is just the beginning of our various series during this COVID period. If you want if you want Dr. Bode back again on a particular topic, please let us know. I think we might have to just go and just bribe Nene somewhere to just say release Bode to us. But Bode, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this time.
A pleasure.
And please look out for more of our series. We'll be talking about the effect of music on our mental well-being and music generally coping with the pandemic. We're talking about exercise pretty soon. And as you know, as a health coach, I'm going to talk about eating well and sleep. And for those women that that we're always conscious about our weight, turn off the lights and you lose some calories. And then join us when we talk about turn off the lights and lose some calories. So everyone, thank you very much. We don't want to take much of your evening, and we hope to see you in our next series. Thank you for joining, and have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
See you next time. Bye. And be good to yourself. Bye. Lights are going off now. Thank you, everybody. And thank you. And lights off now.